Welcome. There is nothing else to do but introduce the man, the myth, the legend, the Michael Weaver. This week, I somehow got a hold of one of the most brilliant and lovable people I know for an interview. What is there to say about this creator? His craft has taken him to all corners of the country as well as the world. Unfortunately, the shows mentioned in this episode are over, but he is always working, so be on the lookout. I constantly learn from him with his unique personality, incredible intelligence, and the biggest heart. He will make you smile, he'll make you laugh, and he'll make you think. Whatever happens, you'll be entertained. This episode was recorded some time ago and published now due to me learning how to edit and publish a podcast, so some info might be a little old, but I hope you can still use all of the information to look up their work, as well as your interest being piqued. I hope you are having a grand day, and please enjoy this week's episode that I've titled, I Want to Change the World. Hello, my beautiful people, and welcome to Pique My Interest, a podcast dedicated to creativity. My name is Scoob Decker, and I am an artist. This podcast was created to learn more about different styles of art, and more importantly, meet some incredible artists and explore their craft and how they create. I am currently in Phoenix, Arizona, sitting here with one of my most favorite people in the entire world. Please, pique my interest about yourself. What is your name?
Hi, I'm Michael Weaver.
And what is your craft?
I work in the theater, and I've done a little bit of everything over the last several years. I act and direct primarily now these days, although I still write some. I have written 4 theatrical pieces that have been produced, and I've directed probably 400-500 productions and acted in maybe twice that many. And I've been a theatrical administrator as well. I was the associate artistic director of a professional theater for 15 years and then came back to that theater a few years after that for another year. And I was the co-founder and artistic director of another professional theater. Both of those are in Spokane, Washington.
So all over the place within theater. So you might not have a specialty within your craft, but is there a specific style or type of theater that you like to do?
No, I like doing it all. And part of the fun I think of that is learning different styles, research, and the history of theater and the different forms that theater can take are fascinating to me. And I was thinking about that the other day. It's like I've never done a Commedia dell'arte piece. And I would be very interested in that, but it would take, really submersing into that style and that period to be able to do that.
I've seen you excel on stage in dramatic acting within a musical while also being off the walls bananas in that same musical too. So I've seen you stretch all types and crafts
Thank you.
in theater. What's your background? Where are you from? Do you have any education in theater? And what was your upbringing that brought you into theater?
I'm from the Seattle area in Washington State, a small town called Port Orchard. And when I was a little kid, all I knew was television. All I'd ever seen was television. And I thought, I want to do that. I can remember being 4 or 5 and thinking that. It's like, that's what I want to do. And then I went to some movies for the first time. And I thought, I want to do that. And that was really sort of my focus until I found out that there was live theater, which wasn't until junior high. They took my junior high class to see a dress rehearsal of the local high school production of Camelot. And I was like, wow, this is really fascinating. And I really want to do that. So, but I, to the point that I would watch comedians on TV when I was a little kid. And there was one in particular comedian called Red Skelton who used to do a pantomime, a really funny pantomime at the beginning of his show. And I think, if my memory is correct, it was on Sunday evenings. And show and tell for me was Monday morning, and I would reproduce that pantomime for the class. So, and that's when I was in second grade. So, the acting bug or the performing bug got me pretty early.
And then you might not want to answer this, but how long have you been in theater?
So, the whole time.
Yeah.
I professionally, I've been working for about 40 years.
Mm-hmm. And then, do you have any education in theater?
I do. I have this is a long story. I went to a community college to start with, and got the AA, and then it's a really long story. But I started working right after that, and I thought, well, as soon as the work dries up, I'm going to go to a university and get the real degree, and I'm still waiting. The work really hasn't dried up. But that being said, I've worked with extraordinary people, and there were two people in particular, Bob and Joan Welch, who ran the theater that I ended up being associate artistic director at for 15 years. And I worked with them extensively for 20 years or better. And they had taught theater at one point, and they were very good at laying out, by example usually, how to create, how to encourage, how to form, both in acting and directing, and eventually in administration. And so I feel like I got just a stellar education from them. And they were people that were trained, with Marlon Brando and Walter Matthau and Elaine Stritch, and those were their friends. And so I got to get an extraordinary education from them, I feel like.
I just love hearing your stories of all the former people you've worked with and the folks that they've worked with. And I'm with you. I think some of the best education can be found in the field and just doing shows and learning as you go.
I'm certainly not against formal education. I think it's great. I think you have to be careful with it, though, because I've worked with a lot of people who have told me what their teachers had told them. And I often think, that's not how it works. But by the same token, there are extraordinary people working today who've gotten extraordinary education. And I've seen actors change in the 40 years I worked dramatically. It used to be, especially in musical theater, I do both straight plays and musical theater, but in musical theater it used to be you were a singer who could dance a little or a dancer who could sing a little, and it was a crapshoot if anybody could act. Today, everybody can do everything. Everybody's a triple threat, and it's extraordinary and astounding, and it's really exciting and gratifying to watch.
There was a time in the mid-2000s where it was almost where you needed to be a quadruple threat. You also need to play an instrument, too.
Yeah, it's true. That's still kind of true.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. As an artist, we are constantly in search for success. And for each person, success is defined differently. Do you consider yourself successful, and what do you consider success in theater?
I do consider myself successful. I think, which sounds egotistical to say now that I say that out loud. But no, I do. Because I work in theater, and I've worked steadily in theater. And I've been really fortunate, and fortunate's not a big enough word. I have not had a survival job or a day job in 25 years. I only have worked in theater for the last 25 years and made a living doing it. So if that's not success, I'm not sure what it is. I'm not rich, but, I've been working.
Yeah, I think that all this time you've never been a part of any union. You've always represented yourself.
Correct.
I think that's really strong of you. And yeah, everybody, especially in theater, thinks Broadway is the end-all, be-all, and that's what we need to work for. But I've seen you work across the country. You've toured across the country. You've done many regional theaters. And just being your friend, your aura, I can sense your success. And I just want to be a part of it. Moving back into a little bit of the creation, how do you start your creation process? How do you break down either a script as a director or approach it as an actor?
It's all from the text. It's all what the characters say, what the playwright is trying to get us to do. I don't think... so one of the things I've learned that is if I'm paraphrasing, let's say I'm acting, and I'm memorizing a script and I'm paraphrasing a line, it's because I haven't figured out what the playwright wants the character to be doing then. If I'm paraphrasing the line, I'm trying to force what I want the character to go there, instead of what the playwright wants. And that's why the words are coming out wrong. So the same thing is true, obviously, even more so for directing, is you've got to do it for the whole piece. Yeah. So going through... Let me explain it this way. I worked with an amazing director once named Ann Neiman. And we were doing a production of White Christmas, and I was playing the general. And I had a line where I said, "That's a very good idea, Susie." And she stopped me one day in rehearsal and she said, "You're paraphrasing that line." And I had played the role earlier in another production, and so just a year earlier. And so I thought, no, I'm not. I've always said it like that. And I said, "It's not, that's a very good idea, Susie." And she said, "No, the line is, Susie, that's a very good idea." And I kind of laughed for a moment, like, does that make a big difference? And she said, "It does make a big difference, because the way you're saying it, it's a comment. The way it's written, it's a discovery." And that was a huge lesson for me. That was the light bulb going on. So every word counts. Every word is a clue that the playwright is giving us in some way. And that's part of what I love, is diving into the script and finding those things that are mentioned. And sometimes a character will mention something in scene 1 that affects how they handle a situation in scene 7. Mm-hmm. And you have to make sure that those are connected. Yeah,
and your craft is finding that balance between those lines and the connection of those, and finding the meaning from the playwright.
Mm-hmm. Right now I'm directing a production of Mame. Mm-hmm. And in Mame, for people that know it, the opening, well, it's not the opening song, but the first big number is called "It's Today." And it's all about Mame telling all those around her that it's today. Celebrate today. Don't think about it. Go for it. Live for today. And at the end of the show, things are going badly for her. And she sings a song about her nephew called "If You Walked Into My Life." But the lyrics are I'm paraphrasing slightly, but no, I won't paraphrase. I'll tell you exactly what they are. Would I make the same mistakes if he walked into my life today? Those todays are connected. Mm-hmm. Even though they're literally bookend 2 hours and 15 minutes apart from each other in the show. And so it's the director's job to make all of those little connections. Yeah. So it's all from the text for me. That's the springboard for everything is.
One of the things that I admire and appreciate about you is that you love history, and you love diving into what was happening during this time, or what was the director like. You love researching directors.
I do.
And so as another theater connoisseur, I appreciate that, and I look up to that, because that's something that I would love to be able to do, rather than just get a script and just go, all right, memorize it and go.
Memorize this list of words.
But to really find the meaning, and especially what the playwright was trying to portray. Mm-hmm. I really like that. In your creation process, I'm sure it's a little different as an actor to a director, but as a director, do you find it difficult to be a little bit the creator as this dissecting the script, as well as the set, as well as making sure the costumes look a certain way, as well as the lights looking a certain way? Do you find that difficult, or?
No, not at all.
No,
because I want everything to add up to a whole. They're all pieces that add together that have to equal something.
So when you're creating a show in your head, are all of these pieces just floating around and you're just kind of picking and choosing the ones that you like?
Well, when I approach designers, I approach with conceptual ideas or thematic ideas. Like, I want this show to be about creating family. I think this show I think this show is about creating family, or I think this show is about revenge, and really good designers will apply that to their designs so it all fits together like jigsaw puzzle pieces that create one big picture. Mm-hmm. I think that for a director, one of the misconceptions I think that people have is that the director is just somebody that comes in and says, do this, do this, do this, and do this. But more importantly than that, what the director is giving the whole piece direction, so that everything that the audience sees and hears and experiences is pointed in the same direction. Mm-hmm. And that's what I think director really means.
So you are a collaborator.
Oh, absolutely.
Definitely. Yeah. Gotta be able to.
And with the actors too. I mean, I'm not a director who comes in and says, you gotta say it like this and you gotta move here. It's not my butt up on stage 8 times a week if I'm not in the show. So I want what's going to be comfortable for the actor.
Yeah. The collaboration and working with actors to work towards a common goal is always going to be more believable and more lifelike than everybody trying to say a punchline and be the center of attention.
I also work a lot. So I ask a lot of questions, and one of the things I say early on in rehearsal is I say to the entire cast, if I ask an actor a question and you know the answer to it, please don't answer. Because I'm not asking this question because I don't know the answer to it. I'm asking this question to create a thought process. Because if the actor can come to that answer or a different answer on their own, it's going to be more real and it's going to be have greater resonance than if I just said, say the line like this and blink your eyes twice.
Yeah, I love in rehearsals in theater, after a rehearsal, there's usually a note session. And I love when a director will just ask a general question to the group or a specific person, and then it's just silent for about 30 seconds while people just sit there and think.
Think about it.
And that's what I love. Those are the creative juices that I love.
Yeah, I love that too.
Just to see those gears. What gets your creative juices flowing? What inspires you?
An exciting project that has something to say to people today.
Okay.
And that, it doesn't have to, that makes it all sound so kind of tedious and grand, and I don't mean it to. That can be true of any show. That can be true with a run in circles and fall down, drop your pants farce. Mm-hmm. And it can be true for Long Day's Journey into Night. There's no point in doing a show if it doesn't make the audience somehow think or reevaluate their values or something in their life. And sometimes, being funny and laughing is what can do that. So again, I'm not saying everything has to be deathly serious and only great drama is acceptable. It's not. Musicals and comedies are great.
When directing or approaching a show from something like the Golden Age, which is a beautiful theatrical time, but it also is a little dated and has some different themes and whatnot, how do you bring that into today's societies? Do you find that difficult to try and bring those themes from different periods?
Do you mean themes that maybe the audience doesn't connect
to?
Or themes that are outdated that you have to deal with? Those are two different things.
Well, maybe both.
Okay. Well, like I say, I've just directed Mame, the musical Mame, and there are there are things that we have to explain. And there's, a little boy in Maine, a 10-year-old boy. We have two, so they don't have to do the show 8 times a week. They go back and forth. But to explain things to them, some was easy, like, what is a spinet? They mention a spinet, which we had to explain as a piano. And he has lines about Mr. Lindbergh and the Spirit of St. Louis. So we talked about Charles Lindbergh. Those were the easy ones. Mm-hmm. The harder ones is when we're talking about, because MAME and its non-musical version, Auntie MAME, is about racism and intolerance. That's some of the themes in it. It's mostly about love and acceptance and live life to the fullest. But there are those moments in it. So to explain what restricted meant, a restricted neighborhood, which gets talked about in the show, that's a hard conversation with a 10-year-old boy, to explain that Jewish people weren't allowed to live there. And that's what Auntie Mame has to fight against. And so, that got me thinking, because I thought, does a modern audience connect with that? Is that a bigger deal to them, or is it a bigger deal to them than it was to these people these characters in the show that takes place in 1938? Mm-hmm. And I don't know if they can. You can't over-explain yourself. You have to trust the intelligence of the audience at some point. And so it's interesting you say that, because I was thinking about that a lot during this process of making sure that it's crystal clear. Even if you don't know what restricted means, it becomes clear that it's a bad thing, and that Auntie Mame is very upset about it. So.
Interesting. I like that. As artists, while we're creating, we always run into a wall. We hit our blocks. What do you do to overcome a creative block?
I give it a day.
Just set it down
walk away from it. If this is, I've as a director, I've worked scenes that I thought I'm not getting this. I'm not communicating what I'm thinking. It's not happening, and I'll just call it that day, and then the next day or 2 days later or whenever you can, come back to it with fresh eyes and a fresh brain, and it seems like the answer is right there. With my writing is the same way. I find that too. I wrote a play once where there was a scene I was working on, and I knew what I wanted to say. I knew what the argument was, the characters what they were talking about, that they were disagreeing on, and I wrote 4 pages, and none of it was right. It was just wandering, and I couldn't fix it, and I just put it down, and I came back a week later, and I went, oh, this is the problem. It's a 4-page scene, and it's really a 3-speech scene. And I just, edit down and simplify. And so walk away, give it a little time. Sometimes your mind, we get these thoughts in our minds we can't get rid of. And a day later, we can see the other way around it.
It's unbelievable what a night's sleep can do.
It is, yeah.
How does your craft change when approaching a script? Those moments where you take a step back from a day, how do you reapproach it the next day with that fresh eyes? Well,
I guess I approach it. That's a good question. I guess I approach it as trying to get back to basics. So again, as I said earlier, everything has to point in the same direction. So maybe I've added a piece of shtick that doesn't work. It's just in the way. It's just getting in the way of the forward-going motion of the play. And finally, if I can see that, if I can edit that down and get rid of that, then I guess that's a different approach. Because sometimes we get stuck in one lane.
But that's almost just kind of going back to your basics of going back to the play. Like, what did the playwright have to say?
What was the playwright's intention?
Is my little shtick here providing anything to the story?
Mm-hmm.
I love that. Okay.
They say that when Moss Hart and George S. Kaufman wrote their first play, what they would do every day is write great jokes and great scenes. And then they would go, at the start of each day, they would go back and cut anything in their script that didn't absolutely affect the plot. It could be the best joke in the world. If it doesn't have something to do with something, they would cut it. They might add it again later, but it's always edited back down to that purest moment, that what is needed, what is absolutely necessary to tell the story there.
And during these times of shaving your work down or cutting things, we also break ourselves down. Do you have any hobbies that kind of can take your mind off things, and do they complement or contradict your craft?
I love movies.
Yes,
but it's kind of connected, even though I don't do film.
It's just a different form of storytelling.
It is, yeah. So I don't know if that really counts as a hobby. I do some writing. That sort of, other than theatrical writing, that sort of takes my mind off it. And I love history. I love learning about history and all those little details, because all of that eventually you're going to be able to use all that knowledge.
Yeah.
It's like when young people ask me what they should study in college to be a director specifically, I always say you should study architecture and visual art and music, classical music and hip hop and country music and any kind of music. You should study everything, because eventually you're going to use it.
Huh. I like that. The architecture, that's fascinating. I've actually found my history in touring comes back when I'm approaching a show and they're talking about a location, and I can go, I've been there. I can kind of recall that and generate that into my...
And if you're doing a set design or working with the set designer, you have to know architecture.
It's true, very much so.
Because we've all seen those sets, right, where there's like a window above the fireplace, and you go, well, wait, what?
But like I said, touring, I've toured with you. You love going to see presidents' graves.
I love presidents' graves. Or celebrity graves. There's my hobby. I love celebrity graves.
Going to see capitals, going to see just history. It's so much fun just traveling with you, because you just find the finest details and you find the joy in everything, and then you can see that within your craft. It's
thank you.
Beautiful. We talked about it a little bit earlier with some misconceptions, but are there any other misconceptions in your craft?
I think the biggest misconception that makes my jaw tight is that it's easy to do, that acting is easy, that theater in general is easy. But people think that for a perfectly valid reason, because really good actors make it look really easy. And it's not really easy. It's really hard. And especially on stage, it's really hard to do it 8 times a week. And make it real and vital and give it the feeling of it's the first time it's ever happened.
And what folks might not realize, that's not only physically in a musical theater show, but it could be mentally draining in an Arthur Miller show or a Tennessee Williams. I mean, it can just be absolutely exhausting. But no, I would agree, it's not easy at all. Yeah. But you look at some of those actors who are just, they have that command on stage and they just make it look easy.
Yeah, and it looks like they're just making it up.
Yeah,
that they're just talking. And the problem is, for a lot of actors, they think, well, that's the goal, is make it look like I'm just talking. But people aren't going to pay $45 a ticket just to see people talk. You can do that at McDonald's
for free.
For free. So it's every line still has to have meaning and has to have a purpose. But it can look like they're just talking.
Yeah.
It's like those great plays of Chekhov, right? Where so many of the scenes, the characters are not talking about what they're talking about.
Yeah.
But it all has to be in the actor's head.
No, that's why I hated studying that stuff in college, because I didn't know what are they talking about now. Speaking of college, do you have any advice for education for starting for newcomers in the craft? Or, like you said,
Study everything.
But at the same time, you don't have to go to school either.
You don't have to, but you do have to get training, and that doesn't have to be formal training.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to learn and pay attention and listen to the really good people you work with that you respect. Mm-hmm. That can be dangerous too, because you can learn bad habits that way.
Yeah, it's being able to filter it.
Yeah, mm-hmm. you have to pick and choose what's you feel is your aesthetic mm-hmm. and your value system.
But it seems like just being able to listen and to be able to
yes,
take it in.
Listen to everybody.
You can't have an idea of how to act. You just have to be able to listen.
Yeah, listen to those stories.
Yes.
People will tell you stories about how they learned and what they've done in the past, and those are valuable stories.
And I've learned, as somebody, a newcomer at one point in theater, sometimes you gotta pry. You gotta ask the questions.
Yeah.
Nobody will just tell you their life story.
No.
But if you sit down and go, hey, Michael, tell me about that one person that you acted with, and you'll just go off, and it is educational. It's informative and just entertaining, because it's the Michael Weaver telling a story, but it's also very educational.
It is. And sometimes, you can be anywhere in your career, and somebody can say something. I directed a play once that the now late Oscar winner Patty Duke was the star of. And we were talking about a scene where she once had to act with somebody who wasn't great. It was in a play, it wasn't one of her movies. And she said, you can't act for two people. And that was like my head exploded when she said that to me. Because I've never thought about that, but I've certainly done it. I've been on stage with somebody who's not holding up their end, and I feel like, okay, I have to bring more energy. I have to work harder. I have to make this clearer. No, that just screws up your performance. You can't act for two people.
Interesting.
And that's an example of somebody who said something to me once where I went, wow, okay, yes.
Huh. Love that. In our craft, in theater, we are usually our harshest critic. But often we are criticized from the media or other peers. How do you handle criticism? I
usually just shrug it off. It rarely bothers me. I'm talking about criticism from other people, mm-hmm. In print or... it's funny. I always tell other theater administrators the hard part about being an artistic director, an associate artistic director, working higher up in the administration of theater, is every single person that works for you thinks they can do your job better than you can. And you just kind of have to learn to live with that. They don't have all the information. They don't know everything you have to take into consideration, but they think they can do it better than you. Self-criticism is another thing. I beat myself up constantly when I'm directing a show. It's not good enough. It's not where it needs to be. And sometimes you just have to let that go, or you have no choice to let that go. It's opening night. Yeah. There's a cutoff. You can't worry this forever. You can't futz with it forever. I'm much harder on myself than what anybody says to me. Mm-hmm. Although people say things sometimes, and I certainly listen. And by that I mean, if I'm directing a show and somebody comes and sees a rehearsal and says, I don't understand what's happening in that scene, that means something to me, because I can work on it. But like imprint critics or professional critics, like, okay, well, sometimes I agree with them, sometimes I don't. Any funny, interesting stories or events with your craft? I know you've got a vault full of them. Something funny or interesting. Wow, I'm stymied.
Where?
Yes, I do. Yes, I
Okay,
do.
all right.
I do have one. So, something I was talking about earlier was how it doesn't have to be a hardcore drama for it to be important. One of the reasons I got into this line of work is because I felt like I could make a difference. I could change the world, just a little bit at a time, just a perception here or a new thought process in somebody there. And I was in a production years ago of Annie, the musical, and I was playing the president, FDR, and it was Annie, and none of us in the show were. It was an old show then, and a little creaky, and it was a paycheck. And the director said at one performance he was standing at the back of the house, and this young couple came in with this little girl who was probably 8 or 9, and she was severely developmentally disabled. And he thought, oh, this is a long show. And they were in the back in the, sort of the SRO section. There were chairs, but and he thought, I don't know how she's going to take this show. It's a long show. The director of Andy. And he said she was kind of talking to them before the show started, and she was kind of banging her feet and clearly didn't want to be there. And he said the overture started and she zoomed in her attention on the stage. And it never left the stage. And at intermission, he went up and chatted with them, and they said, yes, we've just adopted our little girl, and this is her first time at the theater, and she's having a wonderful time. And then the second act happened, and she's watching it, and she zoomed in again, just boom. Completely focused. And at curtain call, we're all coming out, we're taking our curtain calls, and she's clapping. And he said she turned to her parents and she said, aren't they wonderful? We changed the world.
I've heard you tell that story 5 or 6 times, and I love it every time. So great. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Another interesting event that I will say is, where in the world has touring taken you? Where has theater taken you across the world?
Oh, just here.
Just here. Just in Phoenix, Arizona.
Yeah. The great line in Bella Amherst, right? Everybody, Emily Dickinson's play about Emily Dickinson, she says, everybody's somewhere except Emily, and Emily's right here. Well, yeah, as officially, I suppose I live in Seattle. I rarely work in Seattle. Mm-hmm. We're in Phoenix right now, where I just directed Mame, and I'm about to act in Escape to Margaritaville. I work a lot in Florida. I work a lot in Illinois. I work a lot in Pennsylvania, and I've done 3 national tours, one of which was with you for 2.5 years. So I've played all 48 of the contiguous states and several Canadian provinces. Mm-hmm. And then with you, we took Wizard of Oz for 13 weeks in China, 7 cities in China, the Kingdom of Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia for 7 weeks.
And let me tell you, watching Michael explore these countries that have true history that goes back before the 1700s, just watching him just experience it was just so much fun.
And wasn't it crazy? Because, it's we've talked about this many times, but if 5 years ago you'd said to me, make me a list of countries you will never visit, China, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia would have been very high on that list.
And there we were. Oh, goodness. So what's next for the world of theater? Do you see it going anywhere special?
It is changing so fast right now because, the COVID shutdown had a lot to do with that. And digital theater is a new thing, and online theater and Zoom theater. I don't know if that's an official name for something or not. I've seen it.
It is now.
It is now. The exciting thing about theater is we don't know where it's going. And it's, these new voices are coming in, and these new experiences are happening, and new ideas and young, fresh points of view are happening. And I think it's really, really exciting. So where's it going? I don't know, but I'm excited to find out.
Well, let me ask you, for somebody who loves movies like I do and can sit down and watch a movie anytime, any day, we're starting to see a lot of digital tech in the theater. And at what point is that turning into media arts and less theater? And I usually ask performers, and they say technology is going to be the death of theater. But from somebody who likes the media arts, do you see them collaborating more?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I don't think that's the death of theater at all. I think as long as a story's being told by living people standing in front of you, no matter what's around them or behind them or pointed at them, that's theater. That's what theater is.
And with the accessibility of streaming services now, and you can watch anything at any time, do you think that people will still have this craving to see live theater?
Yes, always. There's something about, like I say, somebody standing in front of you. There's Bob Welch, who ran the theater I was talking about, Bob and Joan earlier, that influenced me so much. He used to say that it was hard for theater, nonprofit theater, to get large donations. People were willing to donate to, I hope I can tell this story on your podcast, people were willing to donate to the symphony. Because the symphony, nobody stands in front of you and says, fuck. And in theater we do, which means we're challenging people in a different way. Symphony certainly challenges you, but actors challenge you by standing in front of you and crying. And as long as that happens, people are going to want to see it. It's just different than that remove of a TV show or a video or a movie. There's a protective screen there. That screen is protective. In theater, there's nothing to protect you. It's dangerous.
I hate sitting in the front row. Well, thank you so much. What's next for you personally? You just talked about you're in Maine right now at the Arizona Broadway Theatre. You can find tickets at arizonabroadway.com.
And I directed it.
He's also directing it. He's in it. And then very soon you start Escape to Margaritaville.
Tomorrow we start rehearsals for that I'm in.
Wonderful.
Correct.
And you can find Michael Weaver across the country. He's always doing something. He did mention yesterday a very secret project that he's working on. And hopefully he'll launch it someday.
Someday. Soon.
I am very excited about it. He let me know what it was.
But I'm always somewhere, so, it's like Emily Dickinson. Everybody's somewhere, except for Michael, and Michael's right here.
I can't thank you enough for joining me and piquing my interest about you and your craft. And thank you to all my peakers out there. Let me know if there is any special or unique artist or art forms you think I should explore. Remember, creativity comes from the heart. Push yourselves. Be kind to one another. I'm Scoob Decker, and thank you for helping me pique my interest.